Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And so, in a week that should be dominated by the hopes and trepidation, I suppose, of COP26, an event billed as the future of the human population depending entirely upon a meeting run by Boris Johnson. From a British politics point of view, the climate emergency has taken a back seat because it's now going to be dominated by the beginnings of a trade war with France, with every chance of it expanding to the whole EU. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, with the news that France is getting ready to impose economic sanctions on Britain this week, if an agreement isn't made, and I recognise that Macron and Johnson have met this weekend and they've said that they want to come to an agreement, but Boris Johnson, his wider Conservative Party and the media, shills in his corner, have all swung to an entirely predictable line. This shows that the EU negotiated their Brexit deals in bad faith, they are saying, and this will be justification for suspending the parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol that they have been itching to suspend for months now. Now, I'm going to go over that aspect of this coming trade war separately this week because there's a lot of strands to this and it's going to get very big. But for now, I want to look at some of the facts as well as explore the risky political calculations on both sides, specifically with the fishing dispute. The first two falsehoods from the Brexiteers. So the issue at stake is that a relatively small number of French fishermen, but it's important to them, are being denied the licences that allows them to carry on fishing in British waters that the Trade and Cooperation Agreement guaranteed them. The argument put forward by the UK authorities is that they have no problem issuing the licences, no problem at all. All these fishermen need to do is to produce the appropriate paperwork and it can all be sorted. Come on, Phil, the gammons post in the comments. They just need to sort out the paperwork. It's all fine. You're making a meal out of this. And as if this is all perfectly reasonable. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound reasonable? Of course, when you need a licence, there's going to be some paperwork involved. Just produce the paperwork. Except for two things. Firstly, this is not what the Brexit deal said. There was nothing about this specific paperwork in there. So it is not a condition for the licences. It was made up after the event by UK authorities. Not a single gammon posting in the comments here will be able to point to a single line in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement referencing the offending paperwork. It's simply not there. Secondly, the paperwork basically doesn't exist. This is what makes me think this was deliberate to get France to act in the way they did, playing completely into Boris Johnson's hands. The paperwork being talked about is the sort of thing that larger operators would have had, parts of various programmes, but not all fishermen that were fishing in British waters before the end of the transition period needed it and therefore had it. The UK authorities will know that asking for this specific piece of paperwork, which had nothing to do with the agreement, will prevent certain French fishermen not being able to get those licences. As such, it would obviously demand this particular it would single out French fishermen. The authorities would know that the French fishermen, like a lot of professionals in France, are not shy about taking direct action and that the government can't ignore them. It was inevitable that Macron would have to take some sort of robust action like this. Then there's the second falsehood flying around this weekend, a letter sent by the French Prime Minister to the European Commission. Now, a Tory hack suggested that the letter says that Britain must be made to suffer for Brexit as a warning to others. Now, there's two things here. Firstly, it's not what the letter says at all. It said that Britain must be made to honour the terms of the agreements. But this sort of lie is even better than the previous one. See, with the previous lie about, they just have to produce this paperwork, that succeeds because they know that most people won't actually look at the wording in the agreement. It's a bit like talking about Article 16. Article 16 is just over 12 lines of text. It takes no effort at all to read it, but they know most people won't. So they'll just accept what anyone says is in Article 16. Same with this. But in theory, people could look it up. People could look up the relevant section in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. They could look up the relevant section in the Northern Ireland Protocol. But a letter written in French, well, that works much better because so few Brexit gammons will be able to read French. Even Google Translate is a lot of effort for some people who won't even look up the letter themselves. And even with Google Translate, you can get the gist, but some things can still be lost in translation. The second thing to note is, let us say that this was a letter from France urging the EU to take strong action of their own collectively in the interest purely of making Britain suffer as a result of Brexit, as a warning to others or for whatever other spiteful reason. Let us just imagine that that is what was in it. So what? Didn't they tell us we hold all the cards? Didn't they tell us that we were more powerful outside the EU than inside it? The Brexiteers of 2016 did not accept that the EU even had a way of punishing us, much less the inclination, when it was put to them. Why? Because it was reasonable at the time. At the time, it was perfectly reasonable to say the EU will not want to allow a nation to leave the EU and do as well or better, because then others would lead. Of course. So what are they going to do to punish Britain? The Brexit said they can do nothing to us. What can they do to us? But it's not just from the Brexiteer camp that the bullshit is emanating. This is also a poor move from Macron, in my opinion. There are essentially three parts to his action against our refusal to grant these licences. The first part is a tightening of checks at the border from Britain. Now, this is fine. Nothing the UK government can complain about here. They are doing, but they've got no basis of doing. At the end of the day, we raise those trade barriers that demand those checks. The French are not proposing to carry out different checks. It's the same checks, just on more stuff. The French say that too many British exporters are not getting their paperwork right. And that's certainly true. Even the UK government don't deny that. So France will just say, we need to increase the rate of checks we do to minimise the risk to the single market. Make sure things aren't getting through that shouldn't. That's all fine. You can't argue against it. The second part was a threat, only a threat, to restrict access to energy at some point in the future. Now, on its own, you could argue that's dodgy as well, but there are shortages in the EU. The Gammons seem eager to point out the shortages in the EU. Like with the carbon dioxide shortage, we couldn't get supplies from the EU. We'd normally supply ourselves. Couldn't get them from the EU for a while because they were prioritising their own market because they also had shortages. That's why Northern Ireland was able to be supplied with CO2, but Britain wasn't. It wasn't a punishment. They were just prioritising members of the single market. It also affected other third countries. And the same can apply to energy. In fact, quite separate to this conflict, there is actually a credible chance that the EU will be forced to prioritise supplies of energy anyway. And it won't just be Britain missing out, it'll be other third countries as well. It's just that we are particularly reliant. And France could nudge that decision over the line for political reasons with this justification, whether true or not. But then there's the move to prevent British fishermen landing their catch at a number of French ports. Now, I would imagine this is to show solidarity with the affected French fishermen, because if he didn't have to do this, I think he's a blithering idiot. If he wasn't forced to, politically, I don't think it's a good move. See, there are a number of problems that Macron has created with this latest measure. The first is that it is almost certainly unlawful. Yes, people will say that it's resulted from Johnson's unlawful actions. Fine, you can argue from a moral point of view. The thing about a moral point of view is it's very subjective. But up until this point, the EU have maintained the legal high ground. They haven't broken the law. This move is very much like when the EU threatened to invoke Article 16 themselves as a form of vaccine protectionism earlier this year. That also came as a result of British vaccine protectionism, but it backfired on the EU badly. They withdrew the threat within hours. They never went through with it at all, but the damage was done. The fact that they even suggested they were going to do it lost them that high ground. The same applies here. Not that there will be any legal consequences. Boris Johnson has breached both the withdrawal agreement and the trade and cooperation agreement multiple times over most of the last year. There have been no legal consequences. The other reason why this is a risky move for Macron is that he cannot afford to stick to this position for long. Now, there may be people here thinking this is going to hurt they just see it in terms of this will hurt British fishermen. It's hurting French fishing industry as well. There are workers in France who process and sell that fish. If it's not been landed, what are they going to do? Macron knows that British fishermen have no influence in the EU, in the UK, sorry. They certainly have none in the EU. Normally you might think prevent British fishermen being able to land their fish. They'll put pressure on the government will have to behave. That's not going to happen. Johnson's already massively screwed them over. Knackering a few more isn't going to make him change his mind. But if this action continues, French workers in the fishing industry, well, they'll not have a job to do. Now, there may well be things that I'm missing here. It's possible, for example, that the French government would just compensate those workers while the dispute lasts to keep them on side. Just say, you're not going to lose out here. You know, you keep your jobs. We're going to fund it while it lasts. But this move is one that hurts French businesses as much as UK businesses. And bear in mind that Johnson has already set himself on a path of hurting UK businesses. All of our trade agreements so far are bad for British producers, including a load of farmers in the Tory heartlands, which you would have thought the Conservatives would never have touched. If Macron thinks that he can make Johnson behave by hurting British interests, he's making a terrible mistake. He can only do that by hurting Boris Johnson's interests, and this, I just see it as doing exactly what Boris Johnson wants. So I think this is a case of Macron probably being forced into the action to keep the fishermen on side with an election looming, in which case, does he have a plan really to de-escalate it or to finish it? You know, does that plan involve the EU escalating action? And if so, what can the wider EU do? The answer is plenty, but all of it comes at a cost, which I'm going to pick up in a video tomorrow. But until then, those are my thoughts at the moment on the lies and the politics. There'll be more, of course, because tomorrow is crunch time for this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.